Hello and welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, January 13th. Holland Squallen, Quis Tokmut, to Squamish Okmeo. As always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Please be advised this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting. Corporate Officer Melissa Von Bladul is here today. Can I have someone move adoption of the amended agenda? Or Councillor Stoner?
Before that motion gets put on the floor, I wonder if my council colleagues would consider an additional amendment to the agenda, which would be to consider item 5.1 staff reports, the Q3 financial report and key projects update prior to adoption, the two bylaws for adoption.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Great. Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Pettingill, question.
I was going to have some questions and so on that section. So as long as there's not an assumption, we're just going to blow through that piece. But that's fine.
I don't. There's no assumption we're moving too fast through any of these pieces. I'll call the question just to be clear. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So first up, we have the development permit number DP 632 for 3295 Mamquam Road, which is university mixed use. I will give staff a moment to get set up, and when they're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, planner with Community Development. Here tonight to present a development permit application at 3295 Mamquam Road. At the May 13th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting, the committee passed the following motion shown on this slide. The committee indicated a desire to see more parking offered to help mitigate the impacts of a reduced parking standard for the project and the associated increase in traffic from the project. The subject property is located in the University Highlands neighborhood, adjacent to the Capilano University campus. The majority of the parcel is undeveloped, with the exception of a private school and a gravel parking lot along Helfland Way. The property is split zoned University Campus 1 and University Housing 1, Area 3. The development is only proposed in the area zoned UH1, Area 3. The property is subject to Development Permit Area 1, Protection of the Environment, Development Permit Area 3, Universal Guidelines, and Development Permit Area 11, Primary Wildfire Development Permit Area. A separate delegated development permit is being processed for DPA 1 for this site. This proposal meets the DPA 1 guidelines. The remainder of the project is to be reviewed against the DPA 3, Universal Form and Character Guidelines, and DPA 11, Primary Wildfire Guidelines only, given that the project meets the requirements of the zoning bylaw. Staff's review concludes that the DPA 3 and DPA 11 guidelines are met for this project. This DP application seeks to establish the form and character of 340 apartment dwelling units in 5 buildings and 84 multiplex units. Approximately 3,400 square meters of commercial space is proposed fronting Helfland Way in Building 1, which also contains residential rental units. The remaining 4 apartment buildings will only contain residential units. 11 townhome/multiplex blocks contain the balance of the residential units. 6 blocks of townhome units are located on the eastern portion of the site to provide a transition from the single unit dwellings on Aristotle Drive to the 6-story apartment buildings on the western portion of the site. The apartment buildings have been situated on site to work with the steep grades and minimize impact on adjacent residential uses. 297 units in buildings 2 to 5 and the townhome and multiplex units will be 4 sale strata units, while 32 of the apartment units in building 1 are proposed to be secured as affordable rental housing, and the remaining 95 apartment units in building 1 will be secured as market rental housing. The affordable and market rental units will be secured as rental housing in perpetuity through housing agreements. These rental units meet the 30% residential rental tenure requirement in Area 3 of the UH1 zone. It should be noted that the applicant has volunteered to provide a portion of the rental requirement as affordable rental units. The rental tenure requirement does not mandate affordable rental units. Access to Building 1 and 5 is proposed from a private road that connects to the Capilano University campus. The remainder of the site is accessed from a drive aisle off of Mamquam Road. The application meets the requirements of the UH1 Area 3 zone and meets the DPA 3 universal guidelines. The application had initially sought a variance to the off-street parking requirements. Following the Committee of the Whole meeting on May 13th, 2025, and the feedback received at the project information meeting on June 4th, 2025, where a number of the members of public shared concerns related to traffic and parking, the applicant has revised their application to meet the parking requirements in the zoning bylaw. The 32 units secured as affordable rental housing do not require off-street parking or visitor parking spaces associated with those units and are not included in the parking calculation. The size of the restaurant has been reduced from 200 seats to 50 seats, which reduces the parking requirement for this use from 50 stalls to 13 stalls. Parking calculation is summarized on this slide. My apologies, I might skip forward a whole bunch here. Let's go.
Oh, yeah, I think you
Oh.
should.
The applicants are proposing a shared parking arrangement for a portion of the required commercial parking stalls and residential visitor parking stalls as permitted in section 41(6)C of the zoning bylaw. The memo provided by the applicant's professional traffic engineer identified a maximum reduction of 36 spaces for shared parking between the residential visitor and commercial parking stalls. 655 total parking spaces are required and 656 will be provided. The previous proposal that included a parking variance proposed 503 total off-street parking spaces. 45 visitor parking stalls were added at grade throughout the site, and the additional 108 stalls have been provided in larger underground parkades. The underground parkade areas were increased to accommodate the additional parking. These structures now interconnect beneath the buildings. This slide shows the parkades and sections of the site. Clouded areas show where parking stalls were added. This slide shows more of the parkade and the sections of the site. Again, clouded areas show where parking stalls were added. And this slide shows the site plan with clouded areas where visitor parking stalls were added. The applicants had previously agreed to construct 2 bus shelters near the subject property and still agree to this commitment. Covenant will be registered on title that will require the bus shelter construction to be included as part of the servicing agreement application for the development. It should be noted that since this project no longer contains any variances to the zoning bylaw, the district is not able to request improvements beyond what would be required in the subdivision and development control bylaw. The applicant has volunteered to provide this as part of their application. The mixed-use nature of the proposed development will offer more opportunities for local residents to access daily needs via active transportation methods, resulting in fewer residents needing to travel long distances to access the commercial centers near Highway 99. This will help reduce vehicle trips and ease traffic delays and align with OCP policies to reduce single occupancy vehicle use and support transition away from fossil fuels. Given that there are no variances requested as part of this application and it meets the zoning bylaw requirements, the project is to be reviewed for conformance with the DPA 3 guidelines. Staff's review concludes that the DPA 3 guidelines are met for this project. To inform the community per policy, the project was posted to the district's development showcase and a development sign has been posted at the site. The applicants held a project information meeting on June 4th, 2024. The meeting was well attended with over 50 members of the public in attendance, the majority of whom were residents of the neighborhood. Attendees shared concerns about a single access road into the neighborhood, existing parking challenges being exacerbated by the requested parking variance, negative impact of the increased traffic, and existing issues related to vehicles speeding on Mamquam Road going to or from the nearby trail network. Generally, the sentiment amongst attendees was not supportive of the parking variance or the scale of the proposed development. The applicants revised the proposal to eliminate the parking variance request so that the project is now fully compliant with the regulations in the zoning bylaw. Given that this project meets the DPA 3 guidelines, staff are recommending DP 632 be issued subject to the following conditions: the registration of a covenant for protection of wildfire hazard, the registration of a no gas covenant, the registration of a statutory right-of-way for public access over the honor roll trail, registration of a housing agreement on title to secure the 32 units as affordable rental housing, registration of another housing agreement to secure 95 units as market rental housing, a covenant to secure the construction of 2 covered bus shelters as part of the servicing agreement application for the development, a covenant to secure a commitment for a financial contribution to a car share cooperative to secure car share membership for the 32 affordable rental units, a covenant to secure a shared parking arrangement between commercial and visitor parking spaces on the site, and finally, a covenant to secure the construction of 910 square meters of childcare space in Building 1. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Council, who would like to get us started? Councillor French, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. And as a small preamble to my question, I note that the financial report that we're going to dig into a little bit later tonight talks about the Mamquam road failure and the road safety upgrades that have been ongoing there. So I see from that report that a third party is working to complete the work on that road. Road permitting policy and procedures are being developed, planning for electric gates to eventually be installed. So with that in mind, I'm just wondering if staff could outline for us just what is the district's relationship connection to that road section, the gravel road portion from Masheter up to this development?
Through the mayor, I will take a stab at answering a portion of this, and I may need some support from my colleague in engineering. I can't speak to our relationship to the kind of responsibility with that. If my colleague in engineering has anything to add, I'll defer to him. However, as you noted, there's currently slope instability work that is being worked on to be mitigated on this road. And presently, it is available for emergency egress if it was required to be used for evacuation purposes. And I'll pass it to my colleague Jay if he has anything to add.
Thank you, Brian. Jay Sternino, project engineer with the District of Squamish on the development side. So as you mentioned, the connection to the Mamquam Road, of the Mamquam Road to the University Highlands is currently gated due to slope instability. A private landowner is in the process of completing upslope scaling and material removal as needed to increase safety and improve stability of this slope. Once this work is completed, the road will be available to industrial traffic and emergency traffic by permit only, but will remain closed to the public due to residual risk.
Okay, I was planning a follow-up question of whether or not this road could be used as emergency access. Mr. Daly answered that, so I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, Council? I know there are. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. A few questions. Start with, when was the zoning put in place for this property?
Through the mayor, that was back in 2020. So just a bit of context here. The number of dwelling units that are permitted in the UH1 zone have always been allowed since the first onset of the UH1 zone. And then there was a zoning bylaw update in 2020 that allocated all of the unbuilt units up there to this parcel in this Area 3 zone.
Thank you for that background. The university sub-area plan clearly identifies a number of amenities for the neighborhood, one of which is a second entrance, was always envisioned for this neighborhood at full build out. Who is responsible for delivering the amenities as presented in the sub-area plan?
Through the mayor, that would be a responsibility of the district to negotiate with applicants that come in through for major rezonings or neighborhood planning applications. There are some of these items that are identified in the neighborhood plan were registered on title of certain properties. However, a second entrance was not one of those amenities that we've been able to see registered on any title of the undeveloped properties up there.
And are there any additional properties or future redevelopments that we might see be able to deliver on that? Or is that something that then becomes the responsibility of the district?
Through the chair, I can't comment on that without seeing, like, there's obviously a very large undeveloped parcel north of the university, and without knowing what their development plans are, it's not possible to comment on that.
All right, thank you for that. Specific to this development permit, there are many buildings that are being proposed, and the zoning is quite explicit that it requires, for example, 30% of market rental. Do we have any mechanism to ensure that the developer will build out the full development? So I see it's been proposed as phase 1 and phase 2. How do we make sure that they don't just build the market rental, or sorry, the market components and not follow through on the commercial space, the market rental, and the affordable rental as presented?
Through the mayor, the zoning requires that the commercial space be built first, and all of the rental units are also proposed in that building. So inherently, it will facilitate that delivery.
Thank you. Cut me off whenever you're ready, Mayor. Just a few more questions, though. The landscape design documents as presented include Western red cedar. My understanding is our DPA 11 doesn't actually include or allow for the cedar planting. So I'm just curious if that was intentional, or if we need to correct that.
Through the mayor, so those plantings were removed from the actual landscape plan. Unfortunately, it did not get removed from the planting list. So it is shown on the planting list, but not actually anywhere on the plans.
Thank you. And then some questions that are adjacent to the development permit around the housing agreements that are potentially for council consideration following if the development permit is successful. But do you want me to hold those questions until after, or do you want me to address them now?
I think if you feel it's material to your decision on the development permit, then it would be appropriate.
I will hold it just for the market rental component then, because the affordable units are not required by the zoning. But the market rental housing agreement, we haven't actually included a clause that restricts short-term rental in the market rental units, which we would typically do in the affordable housing component, and we have done there. So I'm just wondering why we haven't included that clause in the market rental housing agreement.
Through the mayor, upon a deeper dive into the agreement, section 2.1F of the market rental housing agreement states no rental housing unit shall be rented on less than a 30-day rental period. So that would deal with that issue.
Very good for now, Councillor Stoner. Okay, I'll go around the room. Other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
I've got a few. Do we have any visualization about, I recall from the first presentation, and it wasn't clear from the report, that if you were in a wheelchair or had accessibility challenges, you could maybe technically navigate the site, but you had to take a pretty long route, and maybe you could only do it at times when there's access to buildings and elevators. Is there a visualization of the access around the site, or can staff comment on, if you're able to walk versus you're in a chair, how does the accessibility of the site compare?
Through the mayor, there's no visualization to address that. Staff can confirm that there are accessible paths throughout the site. Obviously, the site is quite steep with some challenging grades, so not every portion of the site is accessible, but there is accessible paths throughout the site, and someone requiring an accessible path could navigate throughout the site.
But just for clarity then, is the design expectation that, if you had accessibility challenges, you might have to go 3 times the distance of someone that was able to walk it?
No, it is not to that extent. There's a perimeter trail around the development that is probably the lengthiest way that is accessible. The main plaza space, excluding the stairs, is accessible. You can access an elevator in building 1 to get to deal with that grade change if you needed to. The paved areas in the 2 turning circles are accessible. All of the play areas are accessible. All of the main building entries are, and as well as between the areas between the kind of multiplex and townhome units are also accessible. So there are accessible paths. just depending on the grade slopes up the site. So that kind of forested area might not be totally accessible, and you might have to go around to try and maneuver that area because the grades are a bit steeper.
And sorry, in that one section though, will the elevator in the building be open 24/7 so you can navigate that portion, or it's only accessible certain times of the day or certain days of the year?
I do not have the answer to that question. If you were a resident of the building, it obviously would always be accessible to you because you would have access, but I can't comment on whether it's always open to the public 24/7 or not.
Okay. And then there was in our sort of assessment of whether or not it meets the guidelines, there's a comment, meets guideline, the bike path along Mamquam Road is fully separated from vehicle traffic with the exception of a single private road crossing. And I was just wondering if staff can explain what that means. Is there a section, it's just, there isn't a bike crosswalk, or there's a short or long section with no bike lane, or what exactly does that mean?
Through the mayor, that's referring to the drive aisle that is providing the access to the site off of Mamquam Road. So it would there is a driveway that the path has to cross because there is a requirement to provide access to the site at that location.
Okay. And then I was maybe under the mistaken understanding that in our DPA guidelines, we are looking for end of trip facilities, but I actually don't see that. Is that something that we normally look for elsewhere or just in the rezoning, or can staff speak to where we try and deal with that sort of thing?
Through the mayor, it's a zoning bylaw requirement, and they've allocated space in it's labeled it's BOH on the plans, but back of house. There's sufficient area for them to provide that space in those areas adjacent to the bike rooms in the commercial space, but just the specific location hasn't been detailed design at this point because it's a form and character development permit. It would be checked before the building permit gets issued and ensured that it's provided.
Okay. And then, and cut me off when it's appropriate. Just wondering sort of public amenities and sort of the outdoor design. It's not explicit in DPA 3, but I can, with this sort of size in my mind, public washrooms might be something I would expect given the nature and the size of this. Can staff speak to whether that would normally be captured in DPA? We haven't sort of contemplated that, or that's in the zoning, just sort of the large size and the commercial space. Is there public washroom space in this?
Through the mayor, there's no requirement in the zoning bylaw or any district regulation that I'm aware of to provide a public bathroom if you're just talking about a standalone public bathroom facility. Obviously, there's going to be washroom facilities in the commercial spaces that may choose to allow folks to use them if they want, but I can't comment on that further. There's no requirement to do so.
One more.
Yeah, so I just want to push on this a little bit. Like, I guess in my mind, if you're required to provide public outdoor amenity space at some point, intuitively, it's big enough that it's implicit that a bathroom is required. Are you sort of suggesting that, no, if we want that, we absolutely have to be explicit? Or
through the mayor, this outdoor space is required for the development. So typically when we're reviewing these without variances or not at rezoning, we're looking at the zoning bylaw requirements, and the open space requirement is for the residents. So I think the assumption there is that residents would go and maybe use their own bathrooms. But if you're just to make sure I'm understanding, you're talking about like a standalone public bathroom that anyone could just go use at any time.
yeah, and from the, I mean, in my perspective, I understand this is one development, but it's sort of, and it's neighborhood commercial, but sort of, Aristotle and the university serving as well, not just this development. And so I'm trying to think about that, the functionality of that whole neighborhood space.
Jonas Medishka, Senior Director of Community Development. Through the mayor, the only time we can, or we do require public washrooms is when there's some sort of a public district facility involved in the project. So an example would be parks if developer is building a public park, then we make sure there's public washrooms. For the commercial space, it's the licensing and the code requirements that then trigger, whatever, depending on the services that are provided in that commercial space, to have public washrooms or not. So that is not within our jurisdiction.
Other questions, Council? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
From the correspondence we received from the public, a theme that has come up among certain folks, including the members of our realty community, is skepticism about the breakdown, the unit breakdown in the residential. That there is an overemphasis on studio and one bed relative to 3-bedroom units. And my question is, it's really an assumption. I'm assuming that the district has not been involved in advising the development applicant on that breakdown. Is that correct, Mr. Lilly?
Yes, that's correct.
Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. This question, I'm going to recognize first that the question really is speaking to a tension between the UH1, the university sub-area plan, and one development that happens to be located within that sub-area plan. And that's the elementary school site. So in the university sub-area plan, it says, given the isolated location of the neighborhood and the capacity and demands of other schools in the general area, the school district has indicated that a new elementary school will be needed to serve the expected school age population that would be generated by the new housing units. That's from our university sub-area plan. Has the school district been consulted? Is that school dedication or the area no longer required, or is that located somewhere else in UH1?
The Mayor, that is identified and registered in a covenant on title of a property elsewhere in UH1, the property to the north. So should that development or should development on that site proceed, then the school district would be referred to.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you. On the accessibility question and the elevator access, if we assume the elevator wasn't available, would it still meet the requirements? I understand that site has quite a lot of elevation change, and I'm just trying to understand how critical that access is, and if that isn't available, if the accessibility goals are still, we could still see that it meets the guidelines.
Through the Mayor, yes, it would still meet the guidelines, and there's also extensive accessibility requirements in the BC Building Code that need to be met for the project, which would be fleshed out through the building permit process.
Okay, and similarly on the matter of the second entrance, Mamquam Road, with what we have today, I'm assuming because we're here, I just want to double check this, that the access egress is that exists can support this level of growth there from our perspective.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Council, any other questions on this? We do have recommendations we're working towards. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, just to build off of that, the Sea to Sky multimodal evacuation plan that we have, which dates back to 2017, doesn't specifically contemplate the rate of growth that we have experienced to date, and has identified the Garibaldi Highlands as one of the most challenging community or neighborhoods to evacuate from. And that at that time, the Mamquam Road was very much more accessible than it is now. And so I'm just curious how we think about integrating, and I know it's not through this particular development proposal or application, but how do we integrate the planning aspects of our work and the growth management components with our emergency management and multimodal evacuation planning?
Thank you for the question. Pascal St. Louis, General Manager of Public Safety. Yeah, absolutely. So our Sea to Sky multimodal evacuation plan was published in 2019. And obviously there has been some growth in many neighborhoods since that time. So those are good questions about how we integrate planning decisions into some of our evacuation planning. I think ultimately, given that some of the timelines for evacuations that are mapped in the multimodal plan are likely to be extended. I mean, these are always live conversations that we would have in an emergency operations center to determine or to use location and incident conditions to inform our evacuation triggers. So, that's essentially conversations that would be live in an active response. In terms of the first part of your question, maybe that's something we'd have to come back to council on. We have some findings from the Dryden Creek Wildfire After Action Review as we were using some of the considerations of the evacuation plan to guide some of those evacuation alerts and orders. And so all of that's top of mind and kind of part of our work planning for this year about possible updates we can do to our evacuation planning.
Mr. Vilniskis, do you have something to add?
Yeah, just wanted to add that for the mayor, the integration of the two processes, I think, happens ultimately at the official community plan level. So the next opportunity is coming up in the next couple of years to review our growth management system and our neighborhoods.
Thank you for that. Two more questions. One that is very specific to this development permit application. One of the items for this, which is subject to for the development permit, is item 7, registration of a section 219 covenant to secure a commitment for a financial contribution to a car share cooperative to secure car share membership for the 32 affordable rental units. I very much appreciate the spirit of this, but I'm just curious about the functionality of it. Given that there is no car share up there, there's no specific car share space identified in the plans. And I just don't want to set us up that they might have to come back. Like, is there flexibility that we can add to this language that it either become a car share program or a contribution to the transit component, as we've recently developed that new system? I wish I knew the name of the program that we developed with BC Transit because I've referenced it for the last 2 weeks. But there's a new program that we established with BC Transit around how developers can actually pay into our transit system when they ask for variances for parking, or when we have affordable rental units that don't require parking, but they can still contribute to our transit system. So I just want to ground truth the functionality of this component of the development permit and make sure that if there is no car share program up there, then what happens? Do they have to come back for a review?
Through the mayor, no, they wouldn't have to come back for review. It would be dealt with at the staff level because this is also a voluntary commitment. There is space for a car share space if needed. However, the reason there wasn't like a commitment to a specific company was because there isn't one up there, and they didn't. That needs to be fleshed out further. But certainly there could be some language added to the covenant to say, or some kind of alternative, such as the program that you just described,
which is called the Eco Pass program.
Are you good for now, Councillor Stoner?
May I ask my question on the affordable rental housing agreement?
Yep.
I do want to ask this question here just for clarity on what it is that we are securing around the affordable units. So section 2.3, the housing agreement for affordable units is securing the total number of units and the unit types. So studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, but it doesn't specifically identify the expected affordability levels of those units. The way that our housing agreements are written, we set those rents based on future occupants. But if we don't secure like a minimum level of affordability in the housing agreements, then it's up to the developer to put whoever they might like, and the wait list is long. And so what we've seen happen over the most recent units that have come to fruition for affordable units that haven't secured the minimum rental type or rental level is that they end up being rented out to couples only because that's a higher rental value than a single occupant or like a lone parent family. And so I'm just curious if there's any opportunity to identify the rental rates for a portion of these affordable units in the housing agreement, just to seek clarity as we go forward on what it is that we're expecting and who we expect to potentially fill those units.
Through the mayor, that so the specific like a lone parent, any lone parent units weren't secured through this is done voluntarily. So staff are trying to provide the applicant with as much flexibility as possible in recognition that they are volunteering to do the affordable units and there's no requirement to do so. Another factor is that the majority of the units, or just over the majority of the units, are studio units. So those are going to come in at the lowest, lower rates than 1 or 2 bedrooms. So again, just trying to keep it flexible and recognizing that this was done voluntarily.
I totally appreciate that. I think just from some learned experience from the Housing Society, if I may, as the council appointee to that board, it puts whoever is trying to actually fill those units in a really awkward position as whoever it is goes out to market them. Because then you have a long list of single family or single lone parent families that come forward and say that they are eligible, but they're not eligible because of the rates that have been set for the rental rate. So I wonder if there's language we can include in the agreement that stipulates that there actually are going to be no single person or low income family rental rates in this development.
Through the mayor, if I may, typically our housing agreement template does have that information in Schedule C. I do know the housing agreement that you're talking that had that not in their updated template has that information. It's been removed in this case because we're not securing those here, given that it's a voluntary give. And there's no variances or any lever that we could use to negotiate here.
Councillor Penningill, you had your hand up earlier. Was it the question
Yeah.
stands? Go ahead.
Yeah, just a few things and just sort of to help provide clarity to a lot of the questions I saw. So, and I think staff did sort of speak to this, but for clarity, there is no request to vary the density. The density that's being proposed is what's in the zoning. So there's no opportunity for council to sort of weigh in on the density proposed here. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then we heard, I think in 2020, their council approved some changes to where the total density, not the total amount of density, but where it was located in 2020, but 2012 or 2024, 2012 or 2014, in around, or maybe it's 2008, my dates are a bit off, but around the approval of the university, a total density at that time was approved, and that total density, which again, it's moved around a bit, but it hasn't changed, is what was used to calculate the emergency plan in 2019. Is that accurate?
Can you repeat the question, please?
So we've, I guess, whenever we sort of as a community agreed to move forward with the university, there's agreement to do a certain amount of housing as part of that whole parcel. We've moved around where some of that housing has gone, and we did so in 2020, but the total amount of housing units hasn't changed. And so that was set in, I don't know, 2008 or 2012, whenever that was. And those would have been the numbers that we used for our emergency planning. Like we would have assumed, because that amount of density had been approved, that's probably what we would have gone into our emergency planning. Is that accurate?
Thanks for the question. I think it's important to note that these emergency plans are guiding documents. They're not prescriptive. So they give us a rough estimate of, perhaps in this instance, they give us a rough estimate of the amount of time required to evacuate a neighborhood, with probably lots of caveats and assumptions built into that. I think when we look at that, we use it as a tool to help guide planning, but it isn't prescriptive. And so I think don't know if that's quite answering your question. Maybe I'll see if Mr. Valaniscus has anything to add to that one.
Thank you. Through the mayor, we certainly had that information when the last emergency preparedness plan was done. So I can't speak directly to that, but the information is, it's well established, this area and the maximum density that is anticipated here.
And, I wasn't attempting to put staff on the spot. My recollection is that that is the case. And I was hoping to confirm that, but, okay. And I guess though, the point of that question was to help provide some public understanding, and maybe that's something we can follow up on. At the end of the day, though, as I understand, because again, the zoning and density is already in place, there's no request to change that. We can't, regardless of how it was calculated, that's not something we're able to consider today in any case. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. This is a form and character development permit.
Okay. With that in mind, we have the Councillor Greenlaw, and just when we're done with Councillor Greenlaw's questions, if staff could put up the recommendation just to help guide. Go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, I just had a question about the split use parking model that was that's being discussed. And I'm wondering if staff has any comments on the viability of that and if it's actually a very functional way of using parking.
Through the mayor, yes, it lives in the zoning bylaw, so the regulations are in the zoning bylaw and the kind of methodology for how to have the engineer prepare that document lives there as well. So it is an option in the zoning bylaw that an applicant may use.
And while we're on that, I've run into this previously where this overnight use is there, but there's a commercial use that does go into the evening, like the restaurant hours here, for instance, if that goes till later into the evening. Like what sort of technical details go into, like, do we get that specific with this use, like with the use of the commercial units and the shared parking proposal?
Through you, Mayor, no, it just the engineer confirms that the use of these spaces, and then the covenant's registered on title, and then if there was some kind of complaint in the future, I suppose the district would point to this covenant and advise the landowner that they need to be abiding by it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Greenland, did you have an additional question, or are you good for now? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I'm still a bit hung up on the accessibility piece. And I take it that the building code does provide an extra layer of regulation. Am I correct in thinking, though, that sort of looks at individual buildings, or would the building code look at a whole site in context in its review?
Through the mayor, would look at the building piece and any pieces of that building permit that are subject to the building code.
So, sorry, they would evaluate sort of each building individually as standalone, or would the building code get into whole site functionality in terms of accessibility?
Not necessarily whole site functionality, depending on the scope of the building permit. There's also pieces related to fire access and stuff like that, so those things get looked at. This project has made attempts to make it as accessible as possible. It went to ADP. There's a member on the panel who is very well versed in accessibility requirements, and they provided comments at that meeting, and the architects took those comments. Unfortunately, it's not possible to make every area of every site fully accessible, but this project is doing as much as it can, given the topography.
Okay, are you able to put I feel like that's where we may be, council. So, council, we have the lengthy recommendation that Mr. Daly is going to get up there for us, but it's also in the agenda package. Is there someone are we ready for that? Or are there additional questions before we can consider this recommendation? I don't see any other hands for recommendation.
Yeah, I'll
go
move the
ahead.
staff recommendation.
Okay. This hasn't been seconded yet, so do you have, sorry, Councillor Stoner has the floor. Well, Councillor Stoner?
I was also going to move the staff recommendation with a minor amendment to 4.7. That would include a financial contribution to a car share cooperative to secure car share member or some other alternative form of transportation to secure car membership, or sorry, what is that? I'm going to add to a car share cooperative to secure car membership or some other form of shared transportation for the 32 affordable rental units.
Okay, Councillor French is seconding that. There we go. Now let's check with the minute taker. Did you? Okay, Councillor Stoner is going to send that to you. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. I will be supporting the recommendation on the floor for this development permit. As staff have outlined in their presentation and in the report, there are no variances being requested with this application at this time. It does meet the zoning bylaw and all of the requirements as presented. And so I do think it is supportable and it does meet the requirements under DPA 3. I do appreciate all the feedback that we heard from the community, as well as the amendments that have been made by the proponent with feedback from both community members at the public information meeting, as well as council's committee of the whole a number of months ago. I think one of the biggest changes that folks will have seen is there is no more parking variance associated, and I think that it will be well supported by community. I also think that the proponent continues to go a little bit above and beyond of what is actually just presented here in order to try and address some of the core challenges that we know our community is facing in terms of growth. And that is in particular the addition of 32 affordable units, which will be in dire need in our community, as well as some childcare space. This proponent in the development will also be bringing forward some much needed commercial space in this neighborhood that has been long waited for and long envisioned through the neighborhood planning process. So I am very happy to see that our zoning has ensured that that commercial space and the residential rental tenure will be delivered first in this phase development, because I think those are the pieces that are most needed in this region or in this neighborhood. I also heard loud and clear from community some concerns around emergency egress, which I've heard from staff this evening. In a real emergency, we do have access to the Mamquam Road if need be, and continued improvements to that road will be seen. I do think that if this is supported by my council colleagues, I may entertain an additional motion that we write a letter to the province suggesting that they continue to invest in that road, particularly because this one development will likely see 100% of the housing targets that they have established for us potentially get built. And so if they want us to continue to build to their housing targets they have set, then they can start to pony up some money for the roads that we need to be able to safely access the developments and the new housing that our community desperately needs. I'm so happy to support the motion on the floor. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor French, any comments as seconder?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herford. I think that there's a lot to like about this development. It proposes to bring more childcare spaces, which we need, more commercial spaces, and particularly aimed potentially at a grocery store, which would be quite advantageous for all of the Garibaldi Highlands, likely a cafe, some reasonably priced housing rental units, easy access to a car share, or potentially transit passes if it's determined that a car share program is not going to be feasible there. Thanks for that amendment, Councillor Stoner. And also, there's a public art component to this project, which I think is pretty exciting. I attended the public information meeting that was held in June, and I'm quite impressed with the evolution of this project since that public information meeting. There was some excellent participation by the folks who live in the neighborhood and good feedback that was brought at that meeting. And clearly the developer was listening, because what we see in front of us, obviously some of the changes were influenced by the feedback that was provided directly in that meeting back in June. I've watched this neighborhood develop from way back when David Strangway first came into this room to share his vision for a university in Squamish. And what I see here with this proposal is very much in line with the vision that Dr. Strangway had way back when, and the vision that has persisted for the neighborhood. The planning from the start envisioned something like this in about this location within the University Highlands. So I support issuing this development permit.
Thank you. Council, other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Last time out, I'm happy to support the recommendation as we have it at present. Last time out regarding this development proposal, I made some general observations around the parking situation for the Capilano University campus. I've since learned that the Capilano University has substantial opportunity to develop more parking. I was not quite aware of the extent the opportunity that they do have. I'm pleased to see that the campus has adjusted its parking policies since. Among the many observations regarding parking, a lot of them we need to hold on to them and deliver them to our parking strategy update that we're planning to do in 2027. A number of very valuable observations regarding split-use parking, experience with it, this phenomena like overnight parking on the Coast Academy lot. That situation is duplicated in numerous places around the valley, and the issue brought up by one of our correspondents regarding clinics and parking and the specific needs that clinics do have for parking. All of these observations, we need to hold on to them and deliver them to our ongoing parking discussions, including the parking strategy that is planned. We also had a number of observations made about emergency egress. And I suggest perhaps if we don't have one, that we should allocate a web page or an information sheet, more or less of frequently asked questions regarding the Mamquam Road, Garibaldi Park Road situation. Many members of the public would be interested in that information. If we don't have that available, I think we should produce it. These are common observations and important questions. That discussion leads us to the other development proposals in the Highlands area. Of course, lots 509, 510, relevant to the issue of emergency egress. The DPA 3, Councillor French has already referred to the public art. There is, I'll just quote from the DPA discussion report, discussions regarding the location and type of art to be incorporated are still in the early stages, with staff, of course. We should note that we do not have, unfortunately, a context statement for this neighborhood or for the community at large to guide discussions of public art and themes. We have here a gateway to the mountains, a gateway to Garibaldi Park. There is not only First Nations heritage, but there's a mountaineering heritage, Marilyn Ring, who donated the land for the university, railway logging history, Garibaldi Park and Diamond Head Chalet. There's a wealth of storytelling here to celebrate in public art, and we shouldn't be looking at that too narrowly. And unfortunately, we don't have that guiding context statement, but eventually we will produce such statements that would guide those discussions. There is some concern from the public regarding scale and density in this development. We should be mindful that from the very beginning of the University Heights proposal, we're looking at higher density up on in this slopes. And we need to do that in Squamish. We need to make higher density up in the hillsides a success. But it should be no surprise to anyone that this is the direction we're going. It's not a new direction. And in fact, we've made a mistake in the past in having too low a density on the best developable land. And that has been hampered the success of the University Heights. Finally, I think that we have an investor here in the community that is bringing some fresh experience and perspectives, and I look forward to that. It's something we don't often sort of celebrate a new developer for that, but this developer is coming from out of the province with some new ideas and perspectives, and I think that this should be welcome. The evacuation plan came to us in 2019, and there was no opportunity to discuss it because it had already been endorsed by the Resort Municipality of Whistler, so there was nothing to discuss. For me, that was very disappointing. I welcome the opportunity to bring back that evacuation plan for discussion of council at some point in future. Finally, the suggestion's been made that we should write a letter to the province regarding the road. I would suggest that that would be premature until we discuss what's the scope of that letter, because there's a lot of stakeholders involved in that road, including industrial, community forests, and so on. Let's have a full discussion of what we should be doing regarding advocacy to the province. It's not just about housing. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll be supporting the motion on the floor. This DP is not a rezoning. The application is in line with all of the number of housing units that were in our zoning for that area. And the developer has agreed to quite a few things voluntarily, including no gas covenants, a right-of-way on honor roll, some affordable housing, the bus shelters, the car share / transit, and 910 square meters of childcare. So, and I think as far as I can see, and from our ADP's comments, this development permit aligns very clearly with our DP guidelines. So with that, I support the application on the floor.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a little bit torn with this one. As discussed, there are a few things that we did receive a fair bit of correspondence about, but are things that, like density, that were decided, to be honest, a long time ago in an exchange or in trade, we got a university. And, the emergency plan, my recollection is that the numbers, the density here was considered in that plan, may not be adequate. And I know there's been updates and so on, but again, that's not part of our decision today, for better or for worse. My recollection of our discussion last time, and I think why I voted against this proposal last time it came before us, is because I was unsatisfied with the parking proposal, and I think there was a mix on council of why we voted to that. For me, I was not hoping for this outcome. I knew it was a risk, but I don't think a lot more parking, that just means a whole lot more cars on the highway turning left. It means this development is much more appealing, not just to people in Squamish, but to people commuting to Vancouver, which means a lot more people competing for those units, which means those units are going to be a lot more expensive. It means a lot more people, bigger families, because they got more cars, can be at a rec center and so on. And we have limited tools. We with the new provincial legislation, we can't really constrain housing units that much. We do have some ability to actually constrain growth a little bit through parking, and to make sure that what growth happens has less impact on parking downtown, less impact on our roads. And it's not a perfect tool, but it's the one we have. So what I was looking for was actually more investment in transit, sooner investment in transit, and some of those things. That's not what we got here. It's also, for better for worse, not a decision point here. But I wanted to raise that and complain a little bit and do a bit of advocacy, I guess. For me, the sticking point is the accessibility piece, and thinking of our age as an accessibility plan and trying to weigh that against what's in the DPA guideline. And, I reflect that it's maybe a step forward where we are considering that there is an accessible route, at least when the elevator is open. But I guess where my head is at is we should be at a point where the accessible route is the easiest route. And then there's maybe some additional non-accessible routes, but the primary route is the accessible one. And, it doesn't explicitly say that in the DPA guidelines, but I tend to see that there. And so that's where I'm struggling. I may have a protest vote on that point. I'm still sort of weighing that in my mind right now.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll be supporting the recommendation. The decision before us, as others have stated, is whether or not the proposal meets the guidelines, and it does that. And it's actually one of the few that exceeds that in a few different ways. So for those reasons, I'll be supporting. And this area was actually the part of the university lands I was most excited to hear about, sort of in the way back days we've heard about around the table around the inception of this the concept of having post-secondary education in Squamish. So I feel the commercial spaces are vital for functionality of a neighborhood, and really are a catalyst for bringing community together as we have opportunity to cross paths, and whether it's the corner store, grocery store, whatever that's going to look like, the cafe, whatever it is that folks figure out to use these commercial spaces for. And of course, the childcare space should go without saying is just a crucial piece of how our community functions. And having this number of units and the humans that occupy them in this area really helps support the transit service that we need to provide to the post-secondary education and to the existing residents up there already. So, I'll be supporting it. I'm happy to see this move forward. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Greenlaw, Councillor Pettingill opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. So we have the subsequent pieces. Is there any information that you would like to deliver to us before we can consider those, or
No, not unless there are any questions.
Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Can I just clarify one of staff's previous comments about, was Schedule C rescinded, or just the lone parent family calculation was rescinded from Schedule C?
Through the mayor, I wouldn't use the word rescinded. It just wasn't included in this template. It was taken, the template was modified because we're not including it here, but it's not in this housing agreement because it's not being considered as part of it, but it is in the standard template for other housing agreements.
Okay, any other questions on the housing agreements on the first piece, which is the non-market rental? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, to further clarify, on page 219 of my package, there's Schedule C that outlines the lone parent family income limits. And so I just want to clarify if that has been removed in a version that I don't have, or if we should remove it prior to giving it 3 readings.
If it's included in the agenda package, it may have inadvertently made it in there. So it could be removed from the housing agreement. Oh, if we're not securing, yeah, it also has no impact if we're not securing any of them. I understand your comments related to providing clarity, but it effectively is, not relevant if none of the units are secured as lone parent outcome or lone parent rental units, as has been previously handled in the past. It's effectively an example of a calculation that will never be done because there's no lone parent units, if that makes sense.
So for clarity, can we just suggest that we remove lone parent families from the table in 1.1K?
Yes, you're welcome to do so.
Let's see. I see a hand here, and then we'll come back. Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit confused. I guess I had understood that I don't recall, and maybe I've just not been paying enough attention, but units assigned to couples versus lone parent. My recollection is that the calculations were meant to sort of provide equitable-ish access to different family forms, and my colleague has identified a sort of a maybe a flaw in that calculation where it wasn't having that outcome. But now I think I'm hearing is that we actually do assign not just number of beds, but the family structure for units. And so are we, beyond the calculation we assign to specific family structures, is that what we're doing here?
Through the mayor, no, what typically will happen in a housing agreement for affordable housing is that a certain number of the units will be dedicated to a lone parent family. Is it were the way that it's described in the housing agreement, and they would have a lower rate than the average affordable housing unit or a single person household, but that was not secured in this. So it's only for the couple family rate was secured. That's correct.
I can hear the mulling happening in the room, but Councillor Stoner, did you have another question here?
No, I don't have another question. I think I'm ready to move it with a minor amendment, and we'll speak to it if it's.
Okay, go ahead.
So I will move that the District of Squamish Housing Agreement Bylaw 3295 Mamquam Road non-market rental number 3203/2025 be given with a minor amendment of striking the lone parent family's income limit line in 1.1K. And that be given first, second, and third readings. Is that clear enough for?
Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Yeah, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, through the chair, and appreciate, as our previous conversation, that the non-market rental units in this development were being provided and were not negotiated. They were being provided at the voluntary with the developer. I do think that this has emerged as it is a detailed but a challenging component of our housing agreements that needs review. We have put on staff's planning list or work plan a review of our housing agreements as we continue to use them a little bit more frequently. In the good news story, we have affordable housing units that are coming online, folks, and we're using our perpetual affordable housing policy. The challenge in that is that we are seeing that there are some flaws in the way that we have done it. So to Councillor Pettingill's question, the intention, I think, when we first established the perpetual affordable housing policy was to ensure that there were the ability to set limits based on income. But then what has happened is that we have secured just the types of units, not the income amounts. And so when the developers then go do their pro formas, they do it based on the highest rents possible for that type of unit. And then we get in this tricky scenario around what our wait list looks like for who is eligible for those units versus what the rents have been established at. And so it's a little bit nuanced. What it really requires is a much deeper dive into our perpetual affordable housing policy. But I don't think that this is reason to hang this up here. I want to secure these 32 affordable units in whatever way we can, and as been presented here. And I just want to make sure that there's clarity for whoever is filling these spaces at a future date, that it is highly unlikely that the lone parent families would be eligible for these particular units, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. And appreciate my colleague's comments. And that was sort of my understanding of how things were, what the situation was. And so I was just getting a bit confused when we got into the assigning to family structure. So appreciate that clarification and the future work on that. I will say I will support this and use this as an opportunity to add a point I didn't in the last vote, which is I do appreciate that despite there not being much leverage for us to negotiate because there are no variances requested here, there is a fair bit on offer. And so that did make my protest vote a little more difficult in the last one. I think just wanted to underscore the importance of, to keep moving forward on accessibility, but I also, in supporting this, want to recognize that this developer has actually offered a lot that we didn't have much leverage to get, and that is appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. That's my speakers list for now, so I'll offer some comments of my own before I call the question. I'm happy to support this. As I stated in my comments on the development permit, this is going above and beyond, and this is securing exactly that. I do thank you, my council colleague, for highlighting the some of the challenges that our current templates that flow from our perpetually affordable housing policy have created, and I do think that does deserve a much deeper dive. However, for tonight's decision, I'm happy to move this forward. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So next we have the housing agreement for the market rentals. Moved by Councillor Stoner. I'll second that. Any comments here? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So now we're on to neighborhood node commercial zoning bylaw amendment to bylaws. Maybe what we'll do is we'll take a quick break. That'll give opportunity for staff to get set up, and then we can settle into the discussion following that. So we'll take 10 minutes now. So we'll be back. We'll see you back. Actually, let's make it 9 minutes. We'll be back at 7:20. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're now on to the Neighborhood Node Commercial Zoning Bylaw Amendment Bylaw section of our evening. So I will turn the floor over to staff to introduce themselves and run us through the presentation.
Council. Good evening, Council. My name is Mamquam. I'm a planner with the District of Squamish. With me, I have
Asia Phil, also a planner with the district.
Jesse Fletcher, manager of current planning.
tonight we are presenting 2 items. The first is the results of engagement activities from the Neighborhood Node project conducted at the end of 2025. The second are proposed zoning bylaw amendments associated with this project, which include support for existing established nodes in the community and support for the creation of future neighborhood commercial nodes. The Neighborhood Node project is an output of 2 district initiatives. As part of the CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund, the district committed to integrate commercial zoning into new housing areas and existing neighborhoods to support complete and walkable communities as one of the deliverables. The timeline for the commitment was by the end of this month. The proposed bylaw fulfills that commitment. The district also secured a UBCM Complete Communities grant in order to assess day-to-day services available to residents via walking and cycling to neighborhood nodes and implement measures to improve access to neighborhood nodes. The proposed zoning amendments outlined today are direct outputs of these 2 initiatives. The project aligns with policy in several district plans, including the district's strategic plan, the official community plan, the transportation master plan, and the community climate action plan. Engagement activities for the Neighborhood Node project were positioned at the consult level on the IAP2 spectrum of public participation. Let's Talk Squamish was used as a hub for the engagement with information about the project and a survey. That survey was completed by 244 participants, 77% of whom were residents of the Garibaldi Highlands. Staff also held 2 open house events, one at the Brackendale Art Gallery and another at St. Joseph's Church in the Garibaldi Highlands. 65 people approximately attended the 2 open houses, and 3 public comments have also been received. Results of the Neighborhood Node engagement are outlined in the engagement summary attached to the report to Council. There were 5 major themes identified out of the engagement. Theme 1 is concern regarding neighborhood commercial uses on the boulevard. Residents expressed concern related to traffic issues, parking challenges, safety impacts, property values, residential taxation rates, and impact on the residential character of the neighborhood. Theme 2 was concern regarding project engagement and timeline. Some residents felt that the project should have been undertaken at a higher level of the IAP2 engagement scale. Other residents were concerned about limited engagement timeframe and perception that the Housing Accelerator Fund was a motivating factor in the project. Theme 3 is confusion between 2 neighborhood node initiatives. Many comments reflected a confusion between the district's 2 node initiatives. Some residents were under the incorrect impression that properties along the boulevard were to be rezoned to C1, C6, which would support mixed-use, multi-story apartment buildings and would support a continuous strip of mixed-use buildings along the boulevard, but that was not the case. That was confusion of 2 projects that were being brought together at the same time. Theme 4 was that a coffee shop and corner store are uses that are supported by 50% of Garibaldi Highlands survey participants. In the survey, corner stores and coffee shops received the most support within the various neighborhoods. 50% of Garibaldi Highland residents indicated that both uses should be available in their neighborhood. Other land uses saw lower levels of support, with childcare at 28.8%, restaurants at 22.9%, and wellness services at 20.6%. And finally, Theme 5 is a preference to direct new neighborhood commercial to undeveloped or existing nodes. Existing commercial areas that were supported for expanded neighborhood commercial uses included Valleycliff, the Garibaldi Estates commercial area, and the Tantalus node. And new neighborhood nodes that received the most support were the Capilano University area, St. Joseph's Church in Garibaldi Highlands, the west end of Pia Road, and along the boulevard.
Great, thanks, Matt. So I'm going to go over the content of the 2 proposed amendment bylaws, starting first with the local and liquor primary commercial amendment bylaw 3214. No changes have been made to the local and liquor primary amendments that were originally proposed at the December 2nd Committee of the Whole meeting. Bylaw 3214 adds assembly use to the list of permitted uses. It adds a requirement for a minimum of 20% employment space in new development, and it increases the maximum height to 4 stories, all in the local commercial C1 zone. Bylaw 3214 also adds assembly, entertainment, and restaurant uses to the list of permitted uses in the liquor primary establishment commercial C6 zone. So moving on to the Garibaldi Highlands Node Amendment Bylaw 3215, I'll outline the changes that were made to the bylaw, which are based on feedback staff received from council at the December 2nd COW meeting, as well as from the community through the open houses and the survey. So the first change made was to scale back the proposed locations along the boulevard from the entire extent of the boulevard to only those properties that front onto the portions of the boulevard that have on-street parking, bike lanes, and sidewalks, and are considered complete streets that cater to all modes of transportation, including walking and biking. So these properties are highlighted here in blue, located between Skyline and Perth Drives. Staff frequently heard concerns around traffic, parking, and pedestrian safety through the engagement, and note that the primary purpose of Bylaw 3215 is to support the creation of a complete neighborhood where residents have the choice to walk or bike to meet some of their daily needs, thus reducing reliance on driving everywhere. So again, after hearing the concerns from the community on the traffic and parking, staff reviewed potential impacts of a small coffee shop or convenience store being added along the boulevard with district transportation staff, and we don't anticipate that this will create traffic issues for several reasons listed here. So the proposed uses are centrally located within the neighborhood. Residents can choose to walk or bike instead of making a driving trip. Additionally, some of the vehicle trips would be pass-by trips. So these are people passing through for other reasons and stopping at the coffee shop. And some would be what we call capture trips, people that are traveling through the area to access a shop or store somewhere else if the service was not available in the neighborhood. So, for example, instead of driving down to Cloudburst Cafe, Island residents could stop at a coffee shop on the boulevard. Staff also considered potential parking impacts along the boulevard and anticipate that the peak parking demand period for a coffee shop or convenience store would occur at a different time than the peak residential demand. So a shared parking model for the street parking along the boulevard can facilitate residents parking on the street in the evenings and overnight, and customers of a shop or store accessing this street parking during the daytime. Walking and biking to a shop or store would also reduce the parking demand. The second change made was to scale back the uses proposed from everything that fell under the definition of neighborhood commercial to only cafes, coffee shops, and corner stores, which are small-scale food-based uses. This change is based on council's feedback to focus on uses that truly serve the everyday needs of a neighborhood, as well as survey feedback that showed that coffee shops and corner stores were the most popular responses. The third and final change made to the proposed Garibaldi Highlands Amendment Bylaw 3215 was to limit the size of the cafe, coffee shop, and convenience store uses to a maximum size of 100 square meters. Community feedback voiced concern on the size and scale that could be possible under the original proposal, which proposed aligning the size with the multiple dwelling residential building envelope size. Staff researched the size of local commercial or local coffee shops and convenience stores. We compared this to an internet search on average sizes in general to land on what would be a functional, small scale sized business at the 100 square meters. And examples of 2 local businesses that are close in size to this include Wonderland's Coffee and Bean & Co., which are both 95 square meters, and Bean & Co. is shown here. So based on OCP neighborhood node objectives and policies, as well as the changes made to the Garibaldi Highlands Node Amendment Bylaw to align it with survey feedback, staff recommend that zoning bylaw amendment bylaws number 3214 and 3215 be given first, second, and third reading. I'll pass it back to the chair for questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, questions? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
So start with this C1 and C6 change. Unless I've confused things, we've had some requests with people in or looking at some of the I-8, 9, and or 11 in the business park wanting to do assembly. Are we thinking the C1, C6 change might address those folks? They might just choose a different location? Is that sort of just a separate coincidental thing that we're going to address separately, or is there any sort of correlation there?
Through the chair, there's no correlation or relation between the two projects. That being said, with the addition of assembly, it would be allowable that those people that are looking for spaces could go in these C1 and C6 zoned locations.
Okay, other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks very much for the presentation and collating all the community feedback. The parking requirements, the purpose of this neighborhood node is to enable people to walk, cycle, use their neighborhood without driving. And yet we've maintained the parking minimum. My concern, my reservation there is the existence of parking in some ways drives traffic to the area, motor vehicle traffic. Could staff speak to why they chose to include a parking minimum as opposed to exclude a parking minimum?
Yeah, through the chair, the primary driver of keeping the parking minimum, a small parking minimum, so the maximum spaces that would be possible if someone built the 100 square meters would be 2 spaces, is to accommodate employee parking on site and leave the street parking available for customers. That was the primary driver, to seek some sort of balance that allows for a bit to accommodate the employees.
Okay, and just to be clear here, removing a parking minimum doesn't prevent somebody from placing parking on the property, correct? So if a coffee shop, somebody wanted to put in a coffee shop and knew that they would have employees, they could choose to put in parking, or perhaps they were living on site and didn't need parking. They might choose to not build parking. Is that a correct understanding?
Through the chair, that's correct. We do have parking maximums, as you discovered a few weeks back. So that would be a limitation, but yes, they could choose to do additional parking.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Pettingill, go ahead.
Yeah, a few questions. So the idea of childcare has been removed in terms of commercial, neighborhood commercial, but if I understand, residential childcare up to 16 spaces is already permitted and that won't change. That's just an existing use.
Through the chair, correct.
Okay. And one of my other concerns had been around form and character related things and signage. As I read through our sign bylaw, am I correct in thinking that currently they wouldn't be allowed sort of lit signs, glass, plastic, sort of shiny signs? It would be the sort of small wooden type signs that a few home-based businesses have in the area. That would be the extent of what would be allowed.
Through the chair, exactly. So they would fall within the residential home-based signage category. Staff did double check that as well.
Okay. And then I just, I had a comment, I think, about, is Highlands Way the best, or should we also, or instead, the Boulevard, should we also instead consider Highlands Way, especially with the adventure node and so on? And I'm recognizing we just approved a pretty car-focused, dense development, which a lot of those folks are going to be driving 2+ cars per unit back and forth through there. does that change our perspective on, or why wouldn't that change our perspective on the appropriateness of this location? Because we seem to have doubled down on this as a through street. I will say that my experience as someone who walks and bikes and drives there is that not everyone goes 30, but speeds have come way down in general. But you know, with what we just approved and we had limited discretion, I'm sort of struggling with this a little bit.
So through the chair, this project is meant to address neighborhood walkable services. When we did our analysis, we defined a walking shed of 400 meters. That's a pretty common distance that an average person is willing to walk instead of getting into their car to drive. From the bridge at the university to that development is 1,000 meters. It's a kilometer away. And so we're still focusing on this project, knowing that it's meant to serve people walking and biking within their neighborhood to access the services, which they may not choose to walk to the university from the Highlands because it's a bit too far for them.
But I guess, you know, in my mind, what we just approved at the university assumes a lot of people in their cars going other places, downtown, Whistler, Vancouver, driving along that road. So there's a whole lot more people who I would think say, oh, little coffee shop, I'll pull off and stop. Whereas I understand they're more than 1,000 meters, but now they are a lot more people. We've sort of approved or an expectation that they will be driving past there probably. And so I'm wondering how we deal with that, or is there anything, is it not a concern, or is there something we would in this design that discourages those folks from stopping it? Because it sounds like they're not the intended audience, but why would they not want to stop at this great little coffee shop that's right on the way?
Through the chair, I think one of the theoretical approaches here is that we want to have services that people look for day-to-day needs, like coffee shop and corner stores, distributed throughout all the neighborhoods. And so one of the great things about the development proposal that you're discussing is that it includes a fairly sizable amount of commercial space. And so ideally we would have not only this coffee shop or corner store show up along the boulevard, but we would also see something to that effect in that neighborhood. And so people that wanted to swing by a coffee shop would have it a closer option near where they lived, and they wouldn't necessarily have the need to drive to another neighborhood. The idea being that we distribute these throughout the entire community and get the closest proximity to people's residences as possible.
Yes, I'll come back to you, Councillor Penigal. I just want to caution you. I think some of the points, if we turn into like what traffic load was considered in the park in the recommendation, that sort of thing, those would be questions for staff. I think some of the other pieces are potentially for council colleagues, just to try to help delineate between the two.
Yeah, and I guess so I guess in terms of the focus and the purpose, which I totally understand and very much support, I guess in my mind, it makes a little more sense intuitively that, for example, Highlands Way near the adventure hub kind of thing, then it's out of sight, out of mind of the through street traffic, but it's still right there in the neighborhood. So I guess, are there reasons why we didn't sort of consider expanding, or at least expanding, if not switching to maybe Highlands Way as opposed to the boulevard? Like what?
All right. The primary reason for focusing on the boulevard was because it was a complete street that actually had sidewalks, street parking, and a bike lane, which most of the streets in the Highlands do not. And because it was central, it was not focused on creating some sort of destination that would attract people from other neighborhoods. It was very much meant to be the primary, is focused on serving as many people in the Highlands neighborhood as made sense. Notwithstanding that Tobermory and there's other streets that we or maybe not as walkable, but the boulevard made a lot of sense from those primary drivers. And there's lots of people that pass through now that are going up past the university into the SLRD lands for recreational purposes. Some of those would get captured by a potential coffee shop, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're not trying to zone specifically to cater to those folks.
Okay, thank you. Other questions here, council? I don't see any other hands. We do have the recommendations before us. We do need to do them separately. I will, I'm going to move the first one to get us rolling. Seconded by Councillor French. Thank you. I think this particular piece, I was happy to see in the staff report the mention of the confusion between the projects, and I generally support us going out and engaging on as many things as we have, as many moving pieces as we have at any one time. But this highlighted the risk of that, and I could see that both evident at one of the. I was able to make it to the Brackendale event, and you can sort of see and feel that in the comments as well. But I see this as really as a minor change and a continuing evolution, this particular piece, and happy to support. So thank you for all the work on this. Any other comments on this particular piece? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Anderson. Sorry, if you could do your microphone.
I'll be in support of this particular recommendation. Wanted to offer some general comments. We are working under some constraints that are delivered by the funding agreements that we're a party to. And this has constrained our public input processes and our strategy with respect to both of these together, handling both of these together. We have not had a balanced public input participation as we would have wished for. And perhaps that we may have to keep this in mind. I note that the confusion that is referenced in the staff presentation really is to be expected. And there's nothing we can do about that. We are working under constraints. I recognize the staff is working under those constraints. The Brackendale store is highlighted in the slide presentation. And I think that some of these nodes in the Brackendale store and the Eagle Run Village, I fear that we need to be mindful that they not be overwhelmed by housing. And when we address the Brackendale store, I believe that was the last council, it's my fear that the outcome is going to overwhelm or constrain the opportunity for that node to evolve as a commercial and convenience node. And I had the same fear for the Eagle Run Village, where the Bean is located. In the past, we have building supplies and restaurants and bike shops there. But we should, it's a general comment that we need to be mindful. There's other considerations that we might have taken into account in this survey to produce a strategy for these nodes. But one of my concerns is that they could be overwhelmed with housing. This affects traffic access and parking and so on. I think that other themes that might have been addressed that we didn't get to this time, what are the implications of post office access, post box access? This is, I think, an important consideration for people's habits. Another one that some of the committee has brought up is gathering spaces for youth. How do we take these into account? We do take into account daycare. We do it quite regularly, but this is something that we should not lose sight of. So these are general concerns about where we've been in this process. And perhaps we're going to be coming back to some of them as we deal with for example, development applications at some of these nodes. But my bigger concern is we need to allow them to evolve and give them space to evolve. And that space has been constrained and might be constrained by housing and residential proposals at these nodes. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you. On the bylaw that's on the floor with regards to the local and liquor primary commercial for C1 and C6 amendments, I think that this makes good sense. And I hear my council colleagues' concerns, but I actually think that what is being presented in the amendments ensures that there is flexibility for the employment or for the uh, kind of non-residential components in these zones. So we're adding a minimum of 20% employment space and providing additional flexibility to include assembly, entertainment, and restaurant uses in the list of permitted uses. So I actually think it makes the business opportunities more viable in these neighborhood hubs, not less so. And so I'm happy to support that because I think it continues to advance the vision that our community had put forward through the OCP and how neighborhood nodes should try and deliver community connection for all those who are living in the area.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So now we're on to the second piece here, which is the Garibaldi Highlands node. Are you moving that, Councillor Hamilton?
I'd like to move it with a slight change. Whether it should be, whether I should try to move it with a change or separate the amendment.
Move it with the change,
Great.
and we'll see if it's seconded.
Okay.
And we'll go from there.
So the motion would be to, I need to look for the staff's original motion. Right, there it is. Zoning bylaw amendment bylaw Garibaldi Highlands node number 3215 be given first, second, and third readings with the following change. I can email this. That section 2.3 of the bylaw be read, despite section 6A11A, there is no minimum vehicle parking requirement for cafe, coffee shop, or convenience store uses.
Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Greenlaw seconds. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm supportive of seeing neighborhood nodes starting to pop up in our neighborhoods around town, and I believe that one of the ways that we can facilitate these neighborhood nodes, one of the ways that we can actually make them viable, is by not having a parking requirement. This does not prevent somebody from putting parking up to the parking maximums that are allowed. But this does not prevent somebody from putting parking on the property if they so choose, but it allows them, if they want it to be walking centric, to just capture walking traffic, cycling traffic, then the business would be able to choose to do so. I hope that businesses would choose to do this because this would indeed limit many of the concerns that are expressed from the neighborhood regarding vehicle traffic moving around in the neighborhood, turning on and off, increased traffic turning on and off the boulevard. So yeah, I hope my council colleagues can support that change to no vehicle parking requirement.
Okay, Councillor Greenlaw, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak in support of the motion. Originally, when we had this conversation, I thought that we should have parking there, and upon further reflection, I think if we want to minimize the impact that these changes will have on the community in terms of traffic, I think the best option is to truly make these a more walkable, accessible asset for the community. So yeah.
Thank you. Council, other comments on this? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I will support the motion on the floor. I want to thank staff and the community for the significant effort in getting a really fulsome amount of engagement on some of the risks and the opportunities of delivering commercial neighborhood space up in the Highlands. Ever since I think my early engagement in conversations around the OCP and when we originally started talking around neighborhood hubs and neighborhood nodes, walkable, livable communities, the Highlands has always come up as the big rock. It is a really hard place to try and figure out how we get more commercial spaces to all the folks who live in that incredible neighborhood. It's also one that I hear about time and time again as I engage specifically with youth through youth council. The youth who live up in the Highlands feel like it's really hard for them to go anywhere, and they just want somewhere that they could go and meet someone for coffee or go and get some 5-cent candies. And right now they're really limited in doing so because our transit is not yet great, and you shouldn't be on an e-bike if you're under 16, especially not without a helmet. And so this is, I think, a small step in a really important direction to enable the potential for somebody who has a dream for a small scale commercial space along the boulevard to deliver a little bit of a community gathering space for a component of our neighborhood in our community that has asked for it time and time again. I understand that there are a lot of concerns with the change. What does it mean around traffic? What does it mean around where vehicles are going to park? I think that the amendment that has been proposed by my colleague is actually a really thoughtful one. Even just the risk of having more parking spaces that have to then cross the bike lane and the sidewalk is not necessarily what we're intending to do. What we're hoping here is that folks capture, there was some language in the staff presentation around kind of captured trips, like that they're either already driving through or they were going to drive somewhere else, and here they can walk to these spaces or they can bike to these spaces. Or if they are driving through to commute down to Vancouver, they might stop here as opposed to Cloudburst. And so I think that this presents options for the community. I don't think that this is going to, I saw some of the comments that were presented by neighborhood concerns around, well, what happens if every single parcel along the boulevard decides to do this? And then what? I really don't think that that is going to happen. I think the market economics here are a hard sell. And this is really an effort to try and enable somebody who might have a passion project to bring community together the ability to do so. And from that perspective, I'm happy to support the motion on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Pettingill. Then Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. I will support this. And, you know, originally I had some concern about the removal of childcare, but realizing that it's already supported up to 16 spaces, that's a reasonable amount there. I was also, you know, in many of the conversations I heard, people want to maintain a residential character. They're actually, most people I spoke to were excited about the idea of coffee shops and so on, but they didn't want a big glossy, bright, shiny thing that looked like a commercial store in the middle of a neighborhood. With our sign bylaw and the DPA guidelines, it seems like we actually have the tools in place to make sure that that is not the outcome. It would be going for coffee in someone's house. I think the sort of a little bit, while I think our previous decision, again, little discretion there, does really put a focus on this as a through street, this in many ways, which I think is the wrong direction for us to head, I think the amendment especially actually provide some friction against that, and it's a bit of a counterbalance. Now as a friction, it's a stick rather than a carrot, maybe, and people don't always like that. But I think will, if anything, if even one business is able to open, it will help actually slow things down, because people will be pulling in and out of if they drive in and out of a spot. But from what I've heard from staff, the economic viability is quite challenging. It's going to require someone very passionate and creative. And so I'm not sort of concerned about the whole street going commercial. Again, signage and DPA guidelines, make sure it's not going to look commercial. I do feel like I would have preferred to see this up on Highlands Way and closer to the Adventure Hub and some more opportunity. I'm not quite sold on the fairly exclusive focus on the boulevard, but I can live with that as an experiment. And I also sort of recognize that the lots along that area have a lot of parking on the individual properties. And so this isn't a circumstance where people have, you know, 50-centimeter driveway and then we're adding businesses with no parking. This is a very different circumstance. And so, you know, maybe we'll have to move faster rather than slower on resident street parking or whatever sorts of things we decide to do in the future. But I actually think in this particular location, that's a fairly low risk. So on balance, I'm happy to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I will not be supporting this recommendation. I do appreciate staff's efforts and their response to public input in scaling back from the original suggestion for the boulevard. And I do also recognize, as I've already mentioned, the constraints that staff have worked under regarding timelines. We are under some agreements, funding agreements with senior government agencies that have placed some constraints on how we've worked through these two initiatives. I did, however, expect a fuller report regarding the public input. We've just seen earlier this evening a report with that 170 odd pages of public input, and I don't want to draw too much of a comparison there. But I saw that the written comments, there were 2 of them included in the package that I received in small print. I just really wanted to hear more from the neighborhood, which brings me to the key reason I won't be supporting this. It's my experience as a resident of the Hospital Hill neighborhood for most of my life, or a lot of my life, but for it's actually 15 years of dealing with the Scott Crescent development, and 4 different engineering directors, 4 different planning directors, 4 or 5 different councils, and my experience of not being understood, not having my and my neighbors' concerns about the nuances and issues and safety issues and risks, things not taken into account on my streets. And I fear that this is true for these folks in the Garibaldi Highlands. For me, it's safety first. I'm going to accept that they know best, because my experience was we knew best and nobody listened to us. So I want to take a cautionary approach. I'm concerned that the impacts and demands on the boulevard are not quite clear and are only increasing. I also finally will suggest that this is an initiative that I feel shouldn't really have been prioritized. I feel we have a number, I'm going to call them smart growth planning challenges. We're using other language because we're involved with different agreements and programs. But I feel that there's other challenges in the community that deserve staff's attention, still do ongoing, and that this might not have deserved the priority that we've given it, we at council together with staff. Thank you.
Councillor French.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herford. I will be supporting this, despite the fact that I really believe nobody is going to take us up on this. I heard from my colleague next to me the challenges with the viability of operations like what we're proposing here. I've heard that too. And I'd be really surprised if in the next 5 years, any one of these properties moves towards some kind of commercial operation. Nonetheless, I support the change, and thank you, staff, for the work you put into it.
Thank you. Councillor Peniel, do you have an additional comment?
Yeah, just a clarifying question to my colleague. We did have a 22-page report on the node study, it's photos of the boards, and I believe all the feedback that did come from the public is included in our report. So I just want to make sure there's no confusion. I think this was fairly wholesome. I did attend, and this one of the engagements I was able to, this does seem to reflect the written and feedback from the community, unless I'm mistaken.
Councillor Anderson.
I'm referring to, and I'll be happy if I'm making a mistake here, but I'm referring to Appendix A, in which there's only 2 written notes from members of the public, and I had expected to see more fuller selection of the comments that we've received.
Okay. So this is an interesting project, and sets out to solve a very real challenge. Over my life in Squamish, I think I've lived in almost every neighborhood except the Highlands, because I like having certain amenities close by, and I like being able to run out and grab whatever it is I forgot when I was at the grocery store, which is always something. And I've been known to spend some time in some cafes over the years, and having some great solving all the world's issues as you do over a cup of coffee with your community. I'm happy with how this has evolved since it was first presented to us. I think both the lesser number of properties and their location. I think that makes more sense to me than the broader piece that was proposed previously. Similarly with the uses, I think the uses that we've arrived at here make good sense, which is cafe and coffee shop and convenience store. The original recommendation included the small number of parking spots, and the amendment that we've had to that here makes a lot of sense, I think, from a financial viability perspective and from actually targeting the market of folks that live in the neighborhood. I have some concerns around the functionality of the need to have, well, there's no loading zone here, and we talk about the volume that it takes to support a business, which will likely be in a new establishment, will require some volume and some loading of supplies. I do think that with the taken in tandem with the rest of the requirements on these sites for lot coverage and so on, that there is room to accommodate things like that. So rather than being prescriptive, I'll support this in its current form in the spirit of supporting the financial viability of these endeavors, and hope that there's I think that any new operation in this area will need to learn how to work with the neighborhood, and the neighborhood will need to learn how to work with the changes should they occur as well. So in that dance, I'm sure that there's a path to make this work. So I'll be supporting the motion. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And oppose? Councillor Anderson opposes. Motion carries. Thank you so much. So Council, if I can take you back to a couple hours ago when we adopted this amended agenda, there was a change in the order. So what we'll do now is we'll go to item 5.1, which is the Q3 financial report and key projects update. And then we'll move into the adoptions. The floor is yours when you're ready. I know it always takes a minute to get it loaded up there.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Rianne Sousa, and I'm the Director of Financial Operations at the district. To assist with addressing me, my pronouns are she and her. I'm joined here today by Harmony Cornwell, Director of Facilities. Additionally, the Special and Capital Project Budget Managers are joining us online to assist with council questions. The purpose of the presentation today is to provide council with the Q3 financial report and key projects update. Special and capital projects have been grouped into 4 categories. Annual projects are required for ongoing infrastructure maintenance. These projects are to some extent non-discretionary, as failure to provide for this work could lead to failure of critical district infrastructure. To note, some of these projects are extensive and span multiple years. Single-year projects are one-time, one-year projects expected to begin and be completed in the year. Multi-year projects are multi-phased, and therefore budgets are often established across the fiscal years using high-level and preliminary general estimates, and may shift once the estimates progress from Class D through Class A to tender award. And lastly, grant-dependent projects only proceed if grant funds are awarded. There are 62 special projects in the approved financial plan with a total budget of 11.3 million. At September 30th, 2025, 2 have not started, 32 are in progress, 11 are complete, 3 are canceled, and 14 are delayed. There were 124 capital projects in the approved financial plan with a total project budget of $136 million. The 4 largest projects make up 53% of the total capital project budget. The 4 largest projects are the Public Works Facility Replacement, Winnaick Park Sea Dike upgrades, and Brennan Park Projects 1 and 2 Recreation Center upgrades. At September 30th, 2025, 1 project has not been started, 49 are in progress, 17 have been completed, 4 are canceled, and 53 are delayed. Next, I'll review operational expenditures. To note, although special projects were discussed previously, they form part of operations and therefore are included in the operating results. The annual operating expenditures budget for 2025 is 94 million. The expenditures incurred from January to September are 52.4 million, which is 56% of the annual budget. When compared to the 9-month budget, the expenditures are 18.1 million less than budget. The 18.1 million variance is due to a number of factors. However, 2 items make up the majority of the variance, which are amortization that's recorded at year end, totals 9.4 million, and special projects are 4.6 million less than budgeted.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the community watching online. My name is Harmony Cornwell, Director of Facilities. The objective of this section of the presentation is to provide Council and the community with an update on several key district projects. This includes project timelines, any changes since the prior update period, budget status, activities completed during October and November 2025, and any issues or impacts we're managing. These projects are significant either because of their size or their importance to the community. Thank you. For the purpose of this update, we are defining key projects as those with a value of exceeding 25 million or of high community interest and not appearing on the council agenda as a separate item. Today's updates cover major projects meeting these criteria. I will be presenting the information, and we have the appropriate staff members in attendance to answer any questions after the presentation. The Chikai Barrier project is approximately 85% complete. The river has been rerouted through the outlet, and the north abutment and downstream access road are substantially complete. Roller compacted concrete placement on the south abutment is underway and should finish by end of January, weather permitting. Substantial performance is scheduled for April 2026, with final acceptance in July of this year. Construction on the Winnaick Park Sea Dike began in summer 2025 and is on track for completion in summer 2026. Work completed in Q3 of 2025 included ground improvement, in-water and landside fill placement, and fabrication of the concrete float and access ramps. The contractor has now begun the installation of the sheet pile wall and the construction of the habitat benching on the water side of the wall. We're managing 2 issues. Tariffs have resulted in increased costs for aluminum components, in particular the access ramps, and we've had minor delays due to historic contaminants found on site. Both of these issues are being managed within the existing project budget, and we are forecasting to finish construction on schedule. The Brennan Park upgrade is about 85% complete and scheduled for completion in the first quarter of 2026. The south portion of the main lobby, the climbing wall, and the Tantalus and Black Tusk rooms are finished. New staff offices and the Zamboni garage are also complete. Work continues on the north lobby and customer service area, and renovation of the mezzanine and ice rink lobby scope is progressing. Furniture and equipment procurement is underway. As expected with the retrofit, We face challenges, including noise, dust, and power outages that have caused partial closures, including extended pool maintenance and arena shutdowns. The Public Works facility is 40% complete, with overall completion scheduled for June 2026. Preload earthwork, foundations, and the workshop steel structure and roof are done. Next steps include constructing the office steel structure and finishing the workshop interior. We are awaiting a formal notice of delay due to steel delivery issues for the office building, but the team is phasing work so we can occupy the workshop prior to the completion of the office. Environmental considerations like invasive species management and erosion control are also being addressed. The Splash Park project has been delayed until 2027. Staff are reviewing previous work and planning next steps, which include a broader review of electrical and mechanical systems to align with the Brennan Park Master Plan. The project is also part of the Recreation Center Task Force's validation work for the larger recreational plan. The Adventure Center project remains paused. Phase 2 work, covering exterior improvements like the interpretive trail and playground, cannot proceed until we receive updated information from the funder. At this time, we are still waiting for clarity on funding before moving forward. So this concludes the key project updates, and I will hand it back to the mayor for discussion or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, questions about what we've heard or details and reports? Councillor Anderson.
In the Appendix 1 specific special projects details, we have two archaeological impact assessments referenced. One is for the Edgewater Neighborhood Park, the other for the Adventure Center. We also have a Squamish Archaeological Resource Management Integration Initiative described. And I'll just quote from that. There is final step is developing archaeological risk management plan, an ARMP, to guide cultural resource management requirements by the district. My question to staff is, at what point will a progress report or a plan be presented to council? Is it this plan, this archaeological risk management plan, that will come before council? I'm interested in this because these archaeological impact assessments, of course, reflect an important objective that the District of Squamish has, but they also have a lot of implications, specifically for the projects, for their timelines, for their costs. And I guess being an old timer, I have some views about some of the priorities and targeting that we undertake in our work plan for these archaeological assessments. So just wondering, when are we going to receive a report on this initiative? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. My name is Sarah McJanet. I'm Manager of Community Planning. To Council, this archaeological overview assessment project will be slated for completion by June, the end of June of this year. For Council's knowledge, we did receive a project extension for the project, and we will be coming to Council to give an update on the results of the project and highlighting the deliverables and how this work will be informing protocols going forward for improved archaeological resource protection within the municipality. We don't have a timeline set for that, but we can expect probably middle of the year. So as we get closer, we will identify a date for a council update.
Thank you, Ms. McJanet. That's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hamilton, then French.
Yeah, thanks very much. So my question isn't about any particular project, but about our global or our whole progress through our capital project plan. When I look in Appendix 2 and look at the subtotal for single year projects, this is at the end of Q3, we've spent, and I'm using spending as a proxy for how much progress we've made on capital projects, and perhaps that's an incorrect proxy. We've spent 1.8 million of about 5.4 million allocated, so we've only spent 34% of our capital budget. when we're 3/4 of the way through the year in the single year projects. In multi-year projects that are expected to end in 2025, we're only at 17%. My concern is that the money that we haven't spent, the budget that hasn't gone out in 2025, is going to create workload for our staff in 2026, making it challenging to implement our 2026 budget. Is that have staff looked at the impact that incomplete projects in 2025 will have on our ability to execute the things we've budgeted for 2026?
Thank you for the question through the mayor. Carry forwards are an expected part of the municipal budgeting world, and it is absolutely anticipated and considered when we're doing our financial planning. Although this particular year was a very challenging year with labor disputes, a fire, et cetera, we are in fact actually pacing relatively close to Q3 of 2024. So it's not an atypical year and has been considered in terms of the overall planning for 26 in particular, but the 26 to 35 financial plan.
Okay, so this is not a question for staff. This is more a comment for my council colleagues. The fact that we are tracking with a fairly hefty carry forward, I think much heavier, much higher than, I don't mean average for us, but I mean, this is we're coming through to looking at a very large carry forward, and we tend to do that year on year. I think there's a piece here that we're missing, that we're causing ourselves delay because we don't complete the projects when we are expecting to complete them and budget them. And that's on us to make sure that we approve budgets for projects that we believe are completable in the year we budget for them. And that's on us.
I'll go to Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. I'm thinking I might not be asking this in the appropriate place, but I'm going to go for it anyway. I wonder if we can get a brief update on the progress of the pedestrian bridge between downtown and Sea and Sky neighborhood. A third-party construction project, but there's many people that are quite interested in it. The website is indicating completion, or the website project page, completion early this year. So I'm wondering if that project is on schedule for completion within the next couple of weeks. And if this isn't the place to ask that, I get it.
It is not our project, but if someone does have some information to share, I'd welcome it. But at the same time, if not, we can endeavor to get an update in another format.
Through the mayor, I believe Dave Merrow is online.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Dave Merrow, Director of Development Engineering. Apologies, I can't get my video working at the moment. As noted, the pedestrian bridge is a developer-led project. With that said, we are currently, or the developer is currently anticipating to start commissioning of the pedestrian bridge in Q1 2026. So within the next, month or two. Of course, that's dependent on their construction timelines, but staff are heavily involved currently planning for, excuse me, the commencement of commissioning and the commencement of operation shortly thereafter.
Superb. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Pettingill next.
Yeah, just looking at the sort of the detail for the capital and special operating projects, in particular the complete ones. And I was sort of looking at the variance and percentage of budget used. A number are below budget, but they're $40,000, $100,000 projects, $2,000 projects, not necessarily the multi-million-dollar ones, but still in aggregate, are our systems and the improvements we made, is it such that we could get sort of an understanding of the median or mean percentage over under budget overall? Is that something, are we sort of at that point where that sort of thing in the future would be possible?
Through the chair, and sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Heather Boxer, General Manager of Financial, IT and Procurement Services. Yeah, our systems are becoming more and more sophisticated that we can get that sort of data. The challenge is that we would have to, if we're looking at year over year, we'd have to start now, and we don't have comparative data. So certainly we can start extracting some of that data and start tracking going forward for comparisons.
Okay, I won't get into the specific numbers. Basically, what I'm just trying to understand, because I know we've at times had some concern around the cone of uncertainty and so on, and we focus on the bigger project, but I'm trying to understand bigger picture. How do we do relative to our budgets on completed projects? And another question of this, I'm not sure these projects are at a value where there's a contingency and on budget means we used all the contingency or we finished it below, and just sort of understanding. So maybe that's a committee of the whole to decide exactly what numbers we need, but I do have some sort of questions as I start to look at those completed projects. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Stoner, but just while we have on this piece, earlier there was a comment around in the discussion. It came up that perhaps the percentage of the dollars spent is a good proxy for the progress. When do we actually spend the money? Like, when do we get invoiced, and when does the money actually leave our be accounted for as going to the project in relation to action on the project or the project itself advancing? Just to contextualize this, because this is a challenging thought exercise, given that this is a period of time that ends in September 30th. And I see some things that say in progress here that have actually been delivered to us in this room since that time. The boat launch comes to mind. So I'm just trying to contextualize this. And what does that look like? Or is it different per project? Or can someone speak generally to that?
Through the chair, two parts, I think, to answer that question. So just from a project perspective overall, it's definitely not that funds are going or expenditures are going to incur equally throughout the project. It depends what activity is going on. So possibly at the planning phase, maybe you're spending less than when you're in full construction mode. So there's that aspect to it. Then the other piece that you're speaking about in terms of when will we actually see expenses for work that's performed, it should be relatively close. That it may be that some invoicing we haven't received at the time we're reporting, but it shouldn't be that far behind. So I would say it's probably more so speaking to the first aspect where you can't expect project spend to be exactly equal throughout a whole project.
Right. And procurement process for these generally take up the bulk of Q1. Okay. Just with that orientation piece, I'll continue the conversation to Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Appreciate Ms. Boxer's response in terms of kind of our drawdown or spend relative to previous years. I think one of the concerns that I had was actually looking at the percentage of projects that had been initiated or delayed. And so as I read it, 30% of special operating projects have been delayed, canceled, or not yet started. 47% of capital projects have been delayed, canceled, or not yet started. Do we have a sense of whether that is also kind of on track from previous years and how we've, again, kind of accounted for that in our 2026 budgeting and prioritization of work going forward?
Thank you for the question. Through the mayor, yeah, that is also very typical. I think the challenge with let me back up. So the 26 to 2035 financial plan and any other financial plan in the last few years have been very much prioritized on health risk, health, safety, legal risk, and then the district's strategic plan. So the challenge so much is not that something doesn't get finished in the calendar. If it's not in the financial plan, it doesn't get started. So we're also looking at grant application deadlines, et cetera, as well. So, but yes, to your question, the rate in which by project is also very typical to previous years. So we're not really looking at an atypical year by any means at this point.
Okay. That is encouraging and also surprising to hear given the year that we had in 2025. My other question was on a motion that I brought forward back in June that was supported by council to have a future committee of the whole discussion on lessons learned in the delivery of district-led key projects prior to the 2026 budget deliberations, to help kind of frame how we start to we've delivered a number of these projects now. So can I just get a clarity on when that is coming to council, given that we are about to adopt the 2026 budget, but we haven't had that discussion as of yet?
Thank you for the question through the chair. Yes, that presentation was booked and was delayed due to the labor dispute and has been rebooked for a committee of the whole in March.
That's great to hear. It is not on the agenda planner, so I'll double check with the mayor on that. And then similarly, the root cause analysis for Brennan Park.
Thank you for the question through the chair. We have received the draft root cause analysis, and once we receive the final version, which we expect very soon, we'll be pleased to book some time with council to present our findings.
Thank you for that. And then one last detailed question on the Honaik Park Sea Dike construction. One of the issues flagged is tariffs have resulted in increased costs for aluminum products. However, I didn't see any additional requests, I don't think, in the 2026 to 2035 financial plan. So how do we expect to manage that cost escalation as presented?
Thank you for the question. Reid Plaster, I'm a project manager in the capital team and managing the Honaik Park project. So that cost increase is going to be reflected with the contingency we're carrying in the contract. So there's going to be no additional budget needed to address that issue.
That has my speakers list. I'll go back to Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. In the key projects update report under Chikai barrier construction, there is under issues and impacts reporting of certain circumstances, erosion circumstances and debris events that may or may not have been expected. So these appear to be noteworthy to me. We can expect, I assume, that in the near future we will be addressing a local service area, the establishment of a local service area, so we can address a strategy for looking after maintenance of the debris barrier. So I'm not sure whether or what the implications may be between these events that we've experienced and the issue that establishment of this local service area. But my question is, will we have opportunity to explore these circumstances further and to understand or be comforted that about what their implications may be for that strategy? How serious are these erosion and debris flow events? I'm looking to understand whether we'll have an opportunity to explore these further, in particular when we come to discuss a local service area strategy. Thank you.
Through the chair, David Wilson, Senior Manager of Infrastructure Planning. Thank you for the question. Yes, there has been some concrete erosion at the Chikai barrier outlet. That's a result of some debris flows that have occurred during the construction phase. And we're currently in a redesign process for this particular aspect, essentially armoring of the Chikai barrier outlet. And that design is currently taking place with the design basis, or the objective of that design, is to hold operations and maintenance costs the same as what has currently been built into the operations and maintenance cost estimate. That design process and review is currently underway and it's ongoing and hasn't been finalized yet. But that is the design basis. If there is an increase in costs, then that would have an implication for the local area service tax that would be brought forward as part of that bylaw. But we're not at that point yet. And as of right now, the intent and objective is to maintain costs within the operations and maintenance cost estimate.
Thank you, Mr. Olson.
Council, other questions? Keep in mind, we are working towards a receive for information. So if there's no further questions, I'll make that motion.
If I can flag a question for when that service area tax comes back, just
let's save that for the comments.
Okay.
How about that? Just go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
So close, but I have to ask because it's one of the biggest projects that we have on the go, Public Works facility and the potential delay. I see in the notes that there is more detail coming, but can you give us a temperature check? Is that like a year-long delay or a few months?
Thank you for the question through the chair. We are anticipating 1 to 2 months. We are still looking for an end of Q2, beginning of Q3 for the office structure. The contractor is working very hard to minimize any delay.
I'll move receipt. Councillor French is seconding that. Thank you for all the work on this. Obviously, the folks putting together the report. Thank you, but also to the teams executing here. This is each one of these projects are substantial, and it's a great look into where we are. Of course, with the complexity, there are delays and so on. But I appreciate the transparency here. And although I will say that looking at something in this report was up to September, and I know that things have moved since then. So we do exist in an interesting just the cadence there is challenging, and for good reason. The reporting is its own project that is complex as well. So, but thank you very much for the work, and happy to support. Any other comments on this? I know Councillor Pettingill has one. Councillor Pettingill, would you like to?
Yeah, three sort of random things, or not random, but distinct things. So one, when the tax service comes back, I've been sort of wondering if, and I suspect the answer is no, you're out of luck, but if there's any way to capture utilities, in particular BC Hydro and or provincial highway infrastructure, that sort of thing, in a service area, or how that gets accounted for, or my assumption is it doesn't, we're out of luck, but just have some questions about that. I have been, and I mentioned this as something maybe I may bring up in the spring budget. I saw again about some of the trail maintenance equipment. And just as I think about our mode shift aspirations and aim to save $100 million, maybe we do need to think about our level of service. And, it's challenging when we maybe have one winter event and it lasts for a few days. And, but when I sort of contemplate that against really the big shifts we're trying to make, so just sort of highlight as something I'm still wondering about. And then I saw the HVAC discussion at the Adventure Center. I understand that there may be some opportunities as part of the climate action plan work we're doing to electrify that facility, and just want to reiterate, if we find a challenge getting an all-electric unit for the third one, I hope that's council can have a discussion about that. And I hope we are looking for opportunities to dispose of the existing units in concert with that, and that's part of our planning. So I'm going to keep harping on that piece, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, thanks to staff for the work on this report, and to my council colleagues for entertaining the amendment to the agenda to consider this item before we consider adoption of the 2026 to 2035 financial plan. For me, that was an important piece of just procedurally. I think typically we tend to see this a little bit earlier, and the labor dispute in particular delayed the delivery of this report. And it is typically the Q3, at least, is usually a consideration that we have as part of our budget considerations. And I really appreciate the staff feedback on kind of how we are tracking on par with previous years. And maybe it is just something that I need to adjust to. You think after being here for 7 years, I would be like, oh yeah, we typically are on pace at 50% of capital projects by the end of Q3. And still the numbers feels challenging every time I do look at it. And so I do think that there's a piece there that either we just need to wrestle with it as council, or we need to think of how we articulate that in a different way, perhaps. And the update on the key projects that we have ongoing is also really, really helpful for transparency and visibility to our community and to council as we continue to consider what other projects we're adding to the list and the capacity that we have within our organization to do those. So thanks for considering. Happy to support receiving of this report.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much to staff for putting together this report. I know that reporting on and keeping everybody up to date on, particularly on capital projects, that move quickly when they're moving. There's a lot of pieces there, a lot of information that needs to be collected. I do find it extraordinarily valuable to have that information, to see what's happening with the capital projects, because this feeds into how I think about our budgeting process. I find the percentage, what we're presenting with the public works building, this fraction of the contingency that's spent, I find that very useful information. It really helps me track whether to expect budget increases or an additional ask in the future. So things like the Honiak Park Sea Dike, it's great to have that forewarning and the knowledge that this aluminum tariff increase is going to be paid for within the contingency. I'm still not sure whether it's all of the contingency or 20% of the contingency. So that sort of information is extraordinarily valuable for me as I continue thinking about budget. So as much information as we can have on capital projects as they progress is greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Okay, Council, we are now on to adoptions. The first is the District of Squamish 2026-2035 10-year financial plan, bylaw number 3213-2025, which I would take great pleasure in moving. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any comments? I think we all spoke at length to this last week, so just thank you to staff for all the work and my council colleagues for the same. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have District of Squamish. Yes.
Ask a question of staff. If staff have the answer, great. If not, that's okay. Yeah. It's related.
You can try it.
Related to the financial plan we just approved. Does staff have an estimate on the carry forward we can expect from 2026 to 2027? Do we expect to be tracking similar to the 2024 and 2025 carry forwards?
Thank you for the question through the chair. We don't have that understanding at this point, but anecdotally, it looks pretty similar, but we don't actually have any numbers at this point. Invoices aren't in, things like that. It hasn't been completed.
The carry forward is essentially the Q4 variance, which is a couple months off. When should we expect to see that piece, the carry forward?
I believe it's on the council agenda for end of March. It's typically right at the end of the nearing the end of the audit before we come to council. So yeah.
Sorry, I think my question was not articulated carefully enough. So we had a carry forward from 2024 into 2025, and that's known. We're projecting a carry forward from 2025 into 2026, and that's based on like the fractions of the 17 and 34% of our capital budget that's been spent, and I'm just focusing capital right now. And staff said that you said that that was normal. This was a normal sort of level. So should we expect this same sort of carry forward for 2026 into 2027?
Thank you for the question. My response was to that question. Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So next we have the advisory design panel bylaw. Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor French. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So we do have the in-camera announcements that appear on the agenda. Now, the late agenda item is the cancellation of the January 20th, 2026 regular business meeting. I sense that there's a question. I was going to maybe go to Ms. Lambudo. Could you speak to the need for this?
Just before agenda review, which is on Monday, one of the larger items on January 20th was pulled off of the agenda. And as a result, we ended up with about 30 minutes of content for January 20th. So a decision was made with the mayor and acting mayor that to utilize council and staff's time, it was better to consolidate all the items on February 3rd.
And this is where the that ADP adoption that we just did was one of the things that was, we didn't want to impede the ADP's work, so we moved it to tonight, and that's why the agenda was amended, as well as this item to cancel that meeting. So despite best efforts, there was not enough stuff ready to go. So we did the time sensitive things we need to do tonight. So I will move the cancellation of the 20th. Oh, sorry.
Are we, sorry, I haven't looked at the agenda planner. Are we expecting committee of the whole or special meetings during the day on the 20th?
No. That's the right answer. Sorry, there was a nod, which was a little conflicting. I just want to make sure.
Yes, there's still a special business meeting scheduled for the afternoon, which is a significant amount of time.
But not a committee of the whole. Okay. So I will move the cancellation of the regular business meeting, second by Councillor Stoner. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Now I'll be looking, yes, Councillor Hamilton.
I would like to move termination of this meeting.
Councillor French seconds. Shall we debate this at length? Okay. All right. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much.